sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Ladies and gentlemen, and of course, a holiday week for you guys is tomorrow. We off the fireworks for the 4th of July as well. Welcome into the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. Thanks for making us part of your lovely evening on a Thursday. Go to iHeartRadio and all social media platforms on demand to keep you up to date on the show. We got a great one for you because Matt Perkins, believing in the Badgers. You're talking Wisconsin football, basketball. We're talking it all. And also later on, Locked On LA Kings, Eddie Garcia himself is going to be joining us here on the show because NHL free agency has been hot, and it's only going to get better from here. But I do want to start with this because, we pretty much kind of know what to expect, especially with the NFL. And I've been talking about this all throughout the entire offseason, and we're only just about a few Sundays away from us getting into preseason and for us to officially start the 2025 NFL season. But once again, it is continuing to just prove my point and a lot of other analysts' point when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So just early on, they ended up making a trade to going and getting Jalen Ramsey from the Miami Dolphins, and sure enough, wouldn't you know, they ended up getting Jonnu Smith, who just can't ever get away from Arthur Smith. He's his favorite target. And then at the same time, you also trade Minkah Fitzpatrick. So once again, the Pittsburgh Steelers are doubling down on defense, and it's ignoring the problems that you really have, which is your offensive line, which you know is developing, it's young, but yet hasn't reached its full potential. That's going to scream a little bit of concern, especially when you've got a 40-0-over quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. And then at the same time, you've already let Najee Harris go. You're trusting in Jalen Warren. You got the rookie from Iowa, Caleb Johnson. So I don't even know how this is honestly going to work out. But all I know is this, is that TJ Watt is looking for an extension of over $40 million. Well, wouldn't you know, TJ Watt wants to be the most paid non-quarterback player. And it's typical. Pittsburgh loves defense. They love the steel curtain. But sometimes, if you do not have an offense that gives you 25-plus points a game, that defense is going to get gashed, tired, and all sorts of things are going to end up happening. And then here you are probably going to end up missing the wild card. This is just what happens to some of these defensive teams. Again, I like the trench and the grit. I do. But let's be honest about something about Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin has never, ever been creative on an offensive side of the ball. He's always been the motivational, gritty, defensive guy. Like I said, I've said it all the time. He's basically my own personal trainer at my local Planet Fitness because it's, if I need to get fit, I need to get healthy, I need motivation, and I need to clear some space. That's what Mike Tomlin is going to do for me. But when it comes to skill set, offensive weaponry, and then when it comes to your quarterback play, that's kind of where it stops at the door. So again, I think Pittsburgh might have a fighting chance depending on their schedule. But you're going to be outside looking in by literally about 1 to 2 games. And that's why it's like their only ceiling would probably be 10-7. And you'd be lucky enough if you even make that, especially with a stacked conference like the AFC. And the AFC is getting tougher. It's not getting weaker. You got Baltimore twice a year, Cincinnati twice a year, Cleveland's defense, and truthfully, let's see what Shedeur Sanders does in Cleveland. But then you got other teams that are also stacking up. The Chargers, the Chiefs are also reloading. The Raiders got a new coach, and it looks like they finally have stability. And Denver doubled down up on defense, but there's promise in Bo Nix. So the AFC is only going to get much more competitive from here. But if you are Pittsburgh, you got to figure out a way to at least get consistency with the schedule. Because at the same time, like what happened last year, you ended up losing to Cleveland. And I know it's a Thursday night game. Y'all don't really care about it. Neither even on a Saturday night game. But you also can't afford to lose those types of conference games. You also can't even afford to lose those division games. Because the minute that Cleveland ends up beating you at the worst time, and then all of a sudden you start a losing streak, that is where all hell breaks loose. And people are going to be calling for your job. So that's the one thing I'm concerned about with Pittsburgh. And as much respect I have for Mike Tomlin for as long as he's carried the torch, to me, he's just been kind of manning the ship. There's no details to this. There's no upgrades. I'm getting the same similar thing in the last 5 seasons. The last 5. I don't understand this. But Pittsburgh knows they are on they are on watch. They are the team that we really are going to look at all season long. And if one bit of inconsistency with their offense, I'm telling you, and you've heard it from me first. Okay, don't say I didn't warn you, and don't say I didn't even tell you, hey, this was going to end up happening. But, hey, we got a great defense. Good for you. You're spending the most money on defense again for the 5th straight year. You're going to be in middle of the pack purgatory in the NFL draft every single year now. So when are we going to change the narrative here? So, again, I'm not bagging on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have much respect because they are they have very much been a traditional organization, winning 6 Super Bowls, blah, blah, blah. That's great. But we got to talk about the now. We can't be sitting in the rearview mirror every single year and think about how we have 6 Super Bowls. What are you doing right now? That's the way the NFL works. That's why the NFL stands for not for long. You got to get with the times. So good luck to them, but this was truthfully typical. So I'm not surprised. All right. Well, we're going to be shifting up into college because we know that these conferences have just been fantastic. And at the same time, we're already preparing for a new realignment of the Pac-12, but also, too, the NIL deal, the college football playoff restructure. It's going to be really interesting. So to discuss that and also focusing in on them Wisconsin Badgers, here's Matt Perkins with Bleav in Badgers. I tell you, Matt, I mean, I especially with what we saw last year with Ohio State and how the Big Ten, I've watching college football for as long as I have. I've had such great respects for the Big Ten, knowing that they're physical, they love playing in the trenches. Defense has always been such a big thing. But we know that with this the conference realignment, the NIL transfer portal thing, and then not to mention the new way of the college football playoff now. Now, you're not dealing with a conference bid. You got the 4 best teams, and then it's all 5 through 12. It's winner take all at the end of the day when you get to the Natty. So watching Wisconsin and then watching the rest of the other programs up and into this conference, I mean, that's just kind of how it pans out. How do you think Wisconsin really is preparing for this up-and-coming season? Because it's winner take all at this point.
I don't know if you've seen the Badger schedule at all this year, but it is an absolute murderer's row. I mean, it is complete. I mean, you look at, they've got Alabama, they've got Ohio State, they've got all the traditional, Minnesota, Iowa, all those good ones. I think they've got, I think Oregon again or something like that. The schedule for this fall for this team is insane. So I think that there's a good chance that the team's actually a lot better than they were last year, but might end up 4-8 because that schedule is just so brutally tough. But the expectation, at least, is that it starts to resemble Wisconsin football again. The big move in the offseason made by Coach Fickell was to fire Phil Longo actually midway through the 2024 season, brings in Brent Grimes over from Kansas, previously at Baylor, who is going to bring back a ground-focused attack, something that was not there at all under Coach Longo. That trial of the air raid did not work from day one. Obviously, a lot of injuries to quarterbacks did not help, but they are going back to what Wisconsin fans have become accustomed to for the last 35 years. And that is they're going to run to the left, they're going to run to the right, and they're going to run it up the middle. And then they'll maybe throw some play action pass in off of that. But it's going to be all about establishing a run game, especially a wide zone. So that's Grimes' bread and butter, is, really getting out there, letting, the holes develop for some of those backs to hopefully, find the mismatch in the open field and explode out and, see some things that Wisconsin fans were used to seeing with a guy like Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor was an absolute beast at outside zone because he was patient. He'd set it up and then he would get his lane and he would accelerate through that. And Wisconsin has a couple second-year tailbacks in Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree, who will be getting the lion's share of the carries. And both those guys have big playability, especially Jones. He's a guy that I think no one's really talking about outside of Madison yet, because I think he made like 2 appearances as a true freshman, but he's going to be the starter this fall. And he's a 4-star from Maryland in that class of 2024. And he's someone who could have a really big fall if all of the pieces come together in the right manner.
So it is interesting because, I mean, even as I look at some of the statistics here from Wisconsin from the previous year, I mean, Braden Luck, we know, barely cracked at least 2,000 passing yards, but we know that Wisconsin, they're all about, the ground and pound game. So, especially with the Big Ten, we know it's been infamous for it. I mean, watching Penn State, Ohio State, and then even Iowa, and even in these particular areas, So does it truthfully make a difference when you do have the quarterback that will obviously stretch more of the field, and then even with the weaponries? Is that kind of something Wisconsin that, looking into their roster, they've really been focusing on, especially for the up-and-coming season? Because we know the run game and the play action is going to be important, especially when you're in some of those tight window games. I mean, even when I watched the near win against Oregon, I mean, I was just, man, it was just like all fighting, grit. So is it kind of something that they looked toward during the offseason to really try to focus to even get some of those bigger plays involved?
So I think that their big focus, let's start on the defensive side of the ball, because what they realized last year is that they could not stop the run. Iowa ran over, around, and through them in what was one of the most pathetic defensive performances I've seen in a quarter century following this team. And what they did is they went out and got jumbo edges and defensive linemen. I think 7 of them through the portal. And they are just throwing as many bodies at this position as they can, because they had, bad run fits from the linebackers, but just no one on the defensive line was holding up anyone on the opposing offensive line. And there were giant holes for anyone with, a 40 time under 5.5 seconds could run through, right? I mean, these were just enormous lanes. And so they're bringing in these much bigger, much heavier edges. Corey Walker from Western Michigan is probably the cream of the crop there when you look at the transfer portal class, but there's a lot of guys that they're very excited about. Charles Perkins, Parker Peterson coming up from Tulane, JVR Suggs up from LSU. So they think that they have the bodies on the defensive line to actually let the linebackers run free. The leading tackler on the team the last 2 years has been Hunter Wohler, a safety. Most of the time, if your leading tackler is a defensive back, that's usually not a great sign. And so especially in the defense that Mike Tressel wants to run, which is a 3-3 stack, your linebackers need to be everywhere. They've got a couple talented guys there. Christian Allegro, 3rd-year player, who was a really under-recruited prospect out of upstate New York. It was a kid who took a PG year and really blew up. And Tackett Curtis, former 4-star, who's a USC transfer. Those 2 guys at the linebacker position should be racking up a lot more tackles this fall.
Yeah, so it is interesting though, right? Because, me personally, that I'm in the same similar boat. I would love for my linebackers to get up involved, because I would love to have one that I know that's a tackling machine, a guy that's a go up and get it type of player. And then even having, an improviser, a spotter, if you will, for somebody that can focus up on the quarterback, finding out if there's any improvisions or even if there's even the holes in the run game, because then at least they can then see where the ball is at and then finally just attack it right up from there. So we know too, like, I mean, I think it was just interesting the fact that the leading tackler was a safety. To me personally, it's like, I would never see that a whole lot if, in fact, if I got like blitz packages where I've got a Mike safety coming in and going in for the blitz to maybe go and get a sack or get loss of yardages. So with that whole front, I think that's basically where they really had to focus on stopping up and on the run. But even with the 3-3, like, that should be more than enough to be able to at least stop your guys. Or even if you go with, like, sprinkling a little bit of some 4-3 packages here and there, right?
Yeah, well, what it really is, I think, is more of a 4-2-5 than anything else. I think what you've got 2 down linemen, 2 heavy edges. Now you're looking at guys who were playing that position last year at mostly around 240, 250. Now you get a guy like Corey Walker in there, he's 290. A lot of these guys are 280, 290 playing that jumbo edge position now. Yeah, they'll have to drop back into coverage every now and again, but they're really ready to get after the quarterback, set an edge in the run game, and that lets those 2 off-ball backers flow. And those off-ball backers haven't been able to flow because there's been no one, occupying bodies in front of them for the past 2 seasons. So getting heavier up front is so crucial for this team because they have an extremely veteran-laden secondary. I think they'll be starting 5 seniors in their 5 defensive backfield positions, including a 6-year senior in Preston Zachman and Nasir Forkareen at corner and safety, former All-American Ricardo Hallman at one corner. You're looking at Jameer Latimer, who's a transfer from Jacksonville State, who's a 5th year, as well as Austin Brown, who's a senior, who's played a little bit of everything for Wisconsin. He's played nickel. He slotted to play started safety this year, but he can play wherever they need him, in the box, outside the box, even outside corner if they really need him to. So I think the back end of the defense is really, really solid, but it's the question that is on everyone's mind is, will these new bodies in the front 6 be able to hold up and actually not just get gashed in the run game, but also put some pressure on the quarterback? Because there was a complete lack of a pass rush in the past season. Part of the reason they didn't have a lot of sacks, team could just run on them, so they didn't have that many attempts to get to it. But if you're putting your team in a position where the other teams don't have to throw against you, it's not really a great way to start off your plan of attack.
So shifting over to our men's basketball up in Wisconsin, and last year, they went up 4th in the Big Ten, but they, to me, what I like about Wisconsin, and even for like some teams, like most teams, I think Houston, I mean, they got a little bit more of the offensive firepower, but with the defense, and then of course too, with the time of possessions as well, because you want to protect the ball, protecting leads. Wisconsin, we know, like in the last couple of years, they've been pretty damn good at least defending, getting the rebounds, and then finding other ways to attack to get more of the points up to keep those secured leads. So this next year, it's going to be really interesting for Wisconsin moving forward, because not only just competing up and into their conference, but even at the same time, I love watching March Madness basketball because, it actually starts literally on my birthday, and then you get through the entire 64 itself, and then it's just a wild party. So Wisconsin, what they're looking into next year is, we definitely want to start attacking more up on the offensive sides, especially inside the perimeter, be a perimeter attacker, and then find ways to mix in some threes, either from on the wings and the arcs. But I think with the rebounding, they've got at least a bunch of guys that we know that are capable of getting you the rebounds, capable of protecting the ball, and then even be able to go and get possession back so that they can go in and attack some of these fast breaks, right?
Yeah, and I think for this team, though, it's been interesting to see Greg Gard evolve as a coach, from basically just completely mimicking what Bo Ryan was doing in his flex offense to actually adapting to 2025 and adapting around the talents of his players. If you think back just a couple of years ago with Johnny Davis, that team was pretty good, but it was give the ball to Johnny and let him cook. And now, last year, yes, you had John Tonje, who was an All-American, but that team was so much more of a free-flowing, pass the ball's going to keep moving, we're going to make the extra pass, find the open shot. And that finding the extra pass, to the open shooter has always been the hallmark of Wisconsin basketball for 20-25 years, that selfless play. And I think that they've gotten back into that, these past couple seasons. And I think that is what is going to continue to make them good and make them competitive. They've done a good job in the portal this year. I think they just added Elijah Gray from Temple, who should be good wing depth a little bit earlier this week. In addition to him, they've also been able to bring in Braden Carrington from Tulsa, Nick Boyd from San Diego State. Both of those guys, I imagine, will be pretty big contributors right away for this team. But, I think all eyes are going to end up being on John Blackwell, who, was thinking about testing the waters of the NBA draft. He was probably going to be a very late second round pick or undrafted kind of guy, comes back to Wisconsin, doesn't hit the portal. So he had a lot of teams contacting him to, jump their way. He decides to stay at Wisconsin, and he's the kind of guy who has first team all Big Ten potential. He needs to step up as a shot creator with the ball in his hands. He's already a more than solid catch and shoot guy. He can do, a little bit, dribble penetration and stuff like that. But in order to really take his game to the next level, he's going to be the guy this season that has the ball in his hands with 6 seconds to go in the shot clock, and the play is completely broken down. It's going to be like, John, you got to get this now. And he's got to make that step from being the second guy to being the first guy. And I think that's sort of the biggest question for this team going into the season is people think that he can, but will he?
So I think it's interesting. My last question up from here, because I've asked it to, I've been full of college in the last couple of weeks. I've had a bunch of guys asking them the same question about this because we know that the NIL and the transfer portal has really changed the landscape of just college sports in general. Now, what I'm thinking of, because even in college football, is that we get such good games every single year. And then we know people are like, has the Big Ten set the standard now for college football? I still believe because of SEC successes with draft picks, teams that are always competing in the playoffs, they've set the standard straight. And then the Big Ten, you mix up a bunch of those physical teams that I like, those that are willing to get their nose down on the ground and then just go and play physical football. But, when you think of basketball, what I think is interesting is because with this NIL deal, it's now causing a lot of these college players to come back and get the experiences, right? Because to me, I love watching the NFL draft every year because I have that one guy in the first round that I know could be a day one starter or be a contributor to a 53-man roster. Whereas in the NBA, I don't even see these guys as peaks until they're like their third, fourth year in the pros. And then it's like, where did these kids even come from? I want to be able to build that relationship, get to know these guys. So with this and allowing these kids to come back, I'd say maturity for the second, third year being there up in college would allow them to be able to be prepared for that next level, especially for a lot of our domestic stars, because you're seeing a lot of these international players and they're just already built up to that standard, versus what we've got here in the States. So, does that make a huge difference in how we can honestly better it for the next few years ahead, especially now with the NIL, the new money coming in and these players? I'm all about players getting paid, but I'm also all about growth, maturity, and then being prepared for that next gear for them to be able to be ready for the pros.
Well, the thing is that all the European guys coming in have been playing professional basketball since they were 13, 14, right? The clubs that they play for, whether you are in Slovenia like Luka Doncic or then Spain or France, whatever, you are playing in what is, it's very similar to the, soccer academies of Europe, right? And so you've been playing for the club. You've been playing basically pro basketball against men since you were 16 for sure. You look at the guys that Luka Doncic was playing against when he was EuroLeague MVP at 17, 18. These are, grown bleep men that he is going up against. And so these kids have been professional athletes for 4 or 5 years and getting paid, not like college NIL money, but, a living wage, and have learned how to be professionals since a very young age, before we do here in the States. You start to learn how to be a professional in college here in the US. And because you are mandated to stay 3 years as a football player, we are inherently going to know you better as a viewing public. But if you're a one and done, or you're a guy who's bounced around to 3 schools in 3 years, we don't know your story as well, right? And so we're not going to have that same investment in you because you have been going up around and to whatever other stop you're going to make next, right? I think last year there was a player in Wisconsin who then transferred to Kansas. This year, AJ Storr, including high school, is his 8th school in 8 years. You're not going to build that equity with fans, with the viewing public, if you are in a new place every time I blink my eyes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, if I have seen this guy stay at Wisconsin and grow for 3 years, I can say, hey, I saw him when he was a recruit coming in. We got to be excited about his growth, his development. We saw him grow and blossom and mature in front of our very eyes. And now we know that he can go do it at the next level. But when they're just bouncing around, like, you stop caring about them in the same type of way because you just don't have time to create those emotional attachments.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And like I said, I mean, especially when you're having these quote unquote face of the league talks, it's just like, well, we're getting all these new players and, it's just a whole entire wave. It's like we felt like this when MJ ended up retiring, but it was easy because it was like we transitioned to LeBron. We got a chance to know him up from high school and then coming up and into the pros. But then it's like, what's going to happen once LeBron's retired? There's going to have to be, new ones. And especially, too, you got a lot of these international guys that are taking over the league. So it's like, if we could honestly step our way up as the States, to get these players geared up and ready for it, because a lot of this, too, is like the G League being up involved becomes a complete cluster. And then it's just like, where do we really grow from here? You know what I mean?
Well, I think the bigger issue is going to be, in this case, is AAU culture and just the idea of swapping teams and jumping from team to team to team all the time, playing 3, 4, 5, 6 games in a weekend, and just playing and not actually practicing, just playing. But when you talk about face of the league stuff, all of the young American stars outside of Anthony Edwards, all just talking corporate speak. They've all had any personality coached out of them for fear of not being marketable if they say something that is unique, different, anything other than milk toast, right?
Yeah.
And so European guys, like, Jokic doesn't care about your advertising money. He does not care at all about your advertising money. He just wants to go, like, ride his horses.
Right.
But Luka's going to say what he thinks. Giannis is going to say what he thinks. Joel Embiid's going to say what he thinks, but not your American stars. And I think that the loss of players like a Charles Barkley, who would say what is on his mind and is now doing that in the media better than anyone.
Right.
You don't have that from the American stars. And so it's harder for them to connect. Like, it's hard for me to connect with Jason Tatum. Like, I don't think there's anything terribly interesting about him as a person or a player. Like, he doesn't seem to have a personality for me. And I can say, the same thing about a bunch of these other, sort of top tier guys. They're just all sort of like, it feels like they're almost like just commercials of what a great basketball player should like look and sound like, but don't feel like authentically human. And I think that's why we have a tough time finding like the next great American star. And that's why I think Anthony Edwards is the one who's different, because he didn't come up in that AAU system. He was a football player. Right. Like he's just a raw freak athlete, and he has no filter. And so he's the one who could break the mold.
Yeah, no, you know what? That's well said. And I couldn't even agree more, because I'm the same way. I would love to see Anthony Edwards, just really take it, because he just looks and feels authentic. And then it's honestly where it's like, that's the way that a basketball player is supposed to be. Now, granted, he's got a lot of learning to do, because in the end, when you're behind, you can't afford a face of the league guy cannot afford to fold like that up and in the playoffs. But hopefully this next up and coming season, he'll learn that. But yeah, even with the growth of a lot of these stars, if they honestly learn and are mentored from a lot of these stars, then maybe that could give us that fighting chance to really go out, compete. And I'm even looking at it from even a global scale, even when you watch, the Olympics, especially for a USA basketball team. But it should be very interesting, and so hopefully this will definitely turn out in a positive way, because it's just a new platform now with this whole NIL. But Matt, appreciate you for coming on by, my friend. tap in with all of our audiences where people can find you and believing in them Badgers for basketball and for football.
Yeah, man. So me and Matt Bernstein, former Badger fullback and captain, the Hebrew Hammer, we go twice a week talking Badger football. We're interviewing former Badgers. We're out there on all the platforms. I do a weekly recruiting show on Badger247.com. John McNamara and Nick Osen getting really nitty gritty into recruiting. If you're interested in that kind of thing. And then I also produce the Money Down podcast with 3-time Super Bowl champ James White and Sojourn Shelton and Warren Herring. Episode 100 of that dropped today. Interview with Stephon Gilmore. Awesome episode. Make sure you're checking that out. So yeah, you can find me all over those places. I'm online at _Perko_. I think I've got my handle up there on the screen is where you can find me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, at Produced by Perko on Instagram. And yeah, I'm out here, making content, probably consuming more content than I should be. And, fortunately getting to meet guys like you, Jake. This is freaking awesome, man. I love the show. I love the energy. And I hope you'll have me back again.
Absolutely, man. And you know what? I love the positivity, man. But congratulations on 100 episodes, man. Like I said, it's always a daily grind. But you know what? If we love doing what we do and we're providing the content for everyone all around on all these social media platforms, it's so far beyond, man, it's going to make such a big difference. And
yeah, man,
any day and any week. So
I'm excited. Episode 300 of Bleav in Badgers coming out. We dropped 289, I think, today. So,
oh man, I will definitely be
up there.
I'll be tuning in for that one, my friend.
Yeah, we're gonna get some big guests for that one too. So
yes. Take care of yourself, Matt. Appreciate you for coming on by, and good luck for the next up and coming season for Wisconsin this year.
Take care. Jake. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're moving the gears because the NHL free agency has just been so fiery hot, and it's continuing to get like that, especially with all these roster constructions. Just earlier on, we just saw Nikolai Ehlers sign a 6-year contract with Carolina, but we know the resurgence of the LA Kings has been really, really good, and it's only going to get better from here. So to speak upon that, here for Los Angeles, Eddie Garcia joins us on the show. Well, Eddie, I mean, the NHL free agency has just been fiery hot, and I love every minute of it. What has been kind of going through your mind and watching a lot of these other teams make deals, make trades? I know that the only thing that's been kind of more of the curveball has been kind of more of the coaching situation towards the end. Because of some of these coaching hires, I loved what New York did getting Mike Sullivan and a couple of others that just fit the scheme. And watching this whole free agency, it's like an absolute just wild party because we're only seeing right now some of these contracts only going to get much more expensive. And now that we have the new 4-year deal with the CBA, I mean, are we going to at some point expect the next $20 million a year hockey player at some point?
Certainly, yeah, it's trending that way. Connor McDavid needs a new contract after this coming season, so he will be the highest paid player in the NHL very, very soon. A little bit interesting, the Oilers have obviously lost 2 straight years in the Stanley Cup final. I think, his exit press conference, with the media after the season ended, he didn't, there were no threats there, but he was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to take my time. We'll see what happens. And I think he's just kind of flexing his muscles a little bit, saying, I'm frustrated with the way the season has ended the last couple of years. I want to make sure that this organization is committed to getting a championship. And I want to make sure that everything's to my liking before I decide to sign a long-term deal with the Oilers. So maybe he signs like a 4-year deal and then they go through this again in a few years and then he can reevaluate where they've been. And maybe the best player in the game, arguably the best player in the game, decides time to go try something else. So we'll see, but it's approaching that way. The salary cap's going to go up each year over the next 4 years. The business of hockey is doing very well right now. It's great to have a labor peace because I've been a fan long enough. There's been work stoppages and losing a season, and that's something that's obviously the worst case scenario. So hockey's healthy right now. They're probably going to have expansion here at some point in the next couple of years, whether you like that or not. But again, the business of hockey is doing pretty good, and it's having a trickle-down effect to the players and the contracts.
So it is interesting because this past season, I mean, the Western Conference, a lot of these teams, I mean, you got your Vegas, your Winnipegs, and then even when you look at the Dallas Stars, and the LA Kings, I mean, I've watched them for years and covering this team is, winning the 2 Stanley Cups from 12 and 14, and for as good as they've been, with offense, defense, but we know that the Western Conference, and even with what I've seen up in free agency, it seems like I kind of have a lock of the Eastern Conference, but with the West, I'm getting multitude of teams. So it's like, watching the LA Kings and finishing up second in the Pacific and what they're building right now as an entire contribution for just their youth, the youth movement. And then at the same time, Anji Kopitar, Drew Doughty, and multiple others that are really helping out for this youth core. I mean, the Kings, they really are willing to be competitive. And at the same time, they want to be up and in the same plateau as all of these other teams in the Western Conference. So I think it's just like they're making the deals, and then they definitely want to compete with a lot of these top teams here in the Western Conference, right?
Well, there's no doubt that that's what they want to do, and that's the goal. Right now, though, I don't know that they have the top-end horses to really be able to compete, even in their division. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more, but Mitch Marner was the top prize free agent this year. He is in a sign and trade, comes to Vegas. So now they got Vegas with Mitch Marner and Jack Eichel. Obviously, the Oilers have been a huge thorn in the side of the LA Kings, beating them 4 years in a row in the first round. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl likely not going anywhere for the immediate future. Obviously, Draisaitl signed long-term. McDavid will get a new contract, whether it's 4 years, 8 years, we'll have to wait and see. But for the foreseeable future, those two guys aren't going anywhere. And the way the NHL playoff format is set up, the Kings have to go through those two teams to get to the Western Conference Final, unless they are, can win the division and play a wild card. But still, the road before them is difficult, and they just don't have those superstar talents like Marner, like Eichel, like McDavid, like Draisaitl. So it's going to be very difficult. Hockey is very much a team game. It's not just about a couple of stars, but those big guns, those MVP caliber players certainly help a lot in the long run. So the Kings are trying to be competitive. They're going to spend to the cap. They've got a couple of young guys that they hope will take a next step in their development, particularly Quentin Byfield, who was a number 2 overall pick a few years back. They're going to need those guys to step up and become maybe those types of players or close to it. But the Kings they're there, they're getting in the playoffs, but unfortunately for them, they've run into an Edmonton team that's been pretty good the last few years, and they just can't get by them at the moment.
So I was curious because, watching this team the last couple of seasons, the things that were kind of going on the back of my head was a few things. Number one is that outside of Anji Kopitar and Drew Doughty, there were a couple of names that were obviously going to end up being moved. And that was at the time, Alec Martinez gets moved, Jeff Carter ends up getting moved, and then Tanner Pearson, and then even, Jonathan Quick. And to me, it seemed like the Kings were holding on to these guys, for quite some time until the actual youth movement started to help to refresh them to get them to where they are now and still building up for further and beyond. But when that timeline, right, did it seem like the Kings, they really needed to pivot in that direction? And we know that sometimes too, with the draft is also one thing because you're getting the assets. You're also getting a lot of these, top prospects that will eventually become stars in the future and really help out a franchise. But it seemed like from that point forward and to where we are fast forwarding from now, I mean, I was happy at the time when they got Darcy Kemper because I was like, this is a goalie now that will help them to at least get the defenses, the goal, the shot blocks, and then at the same time, give them some of those, what were once losses for the Kings, now the wins to keep them rolling and then keep on building for a lot of their youth movement. But did it seem like that was the pivot at that point that the Kings knew that they needed to make and where we are right now, fast forwarding?
Well, I think most teams are guilty of this. I mean, we saw it with the Chicago Blackhawks. They won 3 titles in 6 years, and now they're in a situation where they're really having a tough time rebuilding. They've lost a lot of games. They've gotten the big draft pick, and it still they haven't even come close to turning a corner yet. So a lot of teams go through this. They hang on to those superstars, those Hall of Famers, maybe a little bit longer than they should. They had Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Duncan Keith there, that core in Chicago. And it's hard to turn the page off of guys who are going to be future Hall of Famers. So every team has to go through it. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how the Florida Panthers handle it. They've won 2 in a row. They're bringing pretty much everyone back when a lot of people didn't think they would be able to bring guys like Aaron Ekblad, the defenseman, Sam Bennett, the playoff hero, the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, Brad Marchand, the veteran, coming back. They're all coming back again. So they're going to have a great chance to three-peat. But at some point, there will be a time where they'll have to decide, when can we move off this, or when do we try and stretch this out for as long as we can. No one's going to complain about it really in Florida. And look, when the Kings won their 2 cups in 3 years, Chicago, with all the success they had, in that moment, their fans are like, look, we'll worry about down the road then. We're winning now. We're having success. Let's enjoy this party as long as we can. And there's plenty of other NHL teams which would have said, hey, we'd love to have 2 cups in 3 years or 3 cups in 6 years. There's still, you look at Vancouver, still never won a cup. Buffalo's never won a cup. Some of those franchises would die to have something like that. So yeah, the Kings probably held on to things a little bit too long. Then they had to go through a rebuild. They kind of rebounded pretty quick. Maybe they would have benefited from building a little bit longer, but it's hard to not want to have success when you have a little bit of a taste of it and you think, well, maybe the rebuild's here a little bit, successful sooner than later. You get in the playoffs. It's a tough road right now, but every team goes through that. That's had a few seasons of high-end hockey or whatever the sport might be. And it's hard to move off of those guys that have been legendary players for you and helped you win championships.
So I got to say, man, because my family that live up in California, we're talking, up in NorCal and then all along the roads of just right there closest to Los Angeles. They would absolutely love this. They diehard Raider fans and especially too, some little bit of some Kings fans. I've got some good friends up in Hesperia, right up and on the Ontario area. But talk to me, man. That was definitely a party in the NHL draft, wasn't it? LA, you're up there in the big lights and just, I've yet to actually see Crypto Arena now. I still will call it Staples Center. I don't care what anybody says, but, to be there and then to just basically see, the atmosphere, even with some of the festivities. And then you watch a lot of these young players, whether down up in Orange County with Anaheim, or you got the LA Kings themselves. That was quite a party, and how the turnout really went from this past NHL draft.
Well, obviously, LA knows how to host events very, very well. And, it's not just necessarily about the hockey part of it, but it's about an experience for all these young guys coming to LA and getting to experience all the things that comes around with that, which is why places like LA will host certain events like that. And certainly there's the venues are all down there in downtown LA as well. So it was an interesting draft this year, though, because it was the first time they had the decentralized draft. It wasn't very popular for a lot of people. I don't know that they're going to return to it next year. The commissioner, Gary Bettman, was not a fan of it, but the teams voted for it 26-6. They tried it. It didn't go as well as they had hoped. I think they're going to return next year to all of the GMs, all of the scouting personnel, all gathering in one place, wherever it might be, instead of being like we see in the NFL, all the teams in their war rooms in their home, their home facilities. The NHL decided to try that like the other sports have been doing. It didn't seem to go over real well with the fans, didn't seem to go over real well with a lot of people. And it didn't seem like the improvements that they wanted to maybe have it be more streamlined, maybe have it be a little bit better of a TV event. It didn't really quite work out that way. Now you could say, well, it was the first time they tried it. There's things they can improve on it, but it seems like, and it was like, I was there. It was a good time. It's always great to be at those kind of events. It's great to see these young people, get to fulfill their dreams of being drafted. There's still that element is always going to be there, but I think I would be surprised if they have this same type of draft coming up next year.
I got to say, though, I absolutely loved, the 2 draft picks were one. You had, the cast of the Mighty Ducks. I thought that was an absolute classic. And then you bring up a special guest up in Happy Gilmore announcing Boston's pick. So it's like, if we could have, more of just those stars and more of just, that kind of moment up from there, I think it would just be an absolute party. And trust me, I would love to be absolutely there because I've only been to an All-Star game festivity as originally born and raised up in Vegas. So I absolutely love the festivity, and I have yet to actually see an NHL draft festivity. I mean, I've been to an NFL draft, and that I thought was fantastic how they put it all together. So to be there up in an NHL draft, I think it would just be, once in a lifetime experience in itself. But one question before letting you go. So hockey's really pivoted in such an interesting way because unfortunately for the entire country of Canada, they got to wait another year until they finally break the curse of winning a Stanley Cup back in their home country. But for the US, they've been thriving for these last 30 years. And then, to see teams like Florida and what Gary Bettman, even preached upon was like, nobody was really paying attention a whole lot to Florida as much. And then you get the expansion up in Vegas. They win a cup in 6. And then, a bunch of the other teams also. I mean, seeing Colorado win a Stanley Cup themselves, after 20 years or so was just unbelievable for them. But I think the Four Nations tournament was fantastic, and it really kind of took a lot of breaths away. I really hope they do this more often. But we know that we've got the Olympics coming up the next year, and where we're going to have a lot more stars participating up and in it. But is it safe to say? Because, I mean, I know Los Angeles, and it's hard even with the state of California, where you have a state tax, and even everywhere else around that's trying to compete in these CBAs and even with these tax thresholds. But even when you get Vegas and Florida, they got no state tax. I mean, it's kind of hard for other teams to really compete in that. So seeing just this whole entire change, I think the NHL is going to be in such great hands because Major League Baseball, I was having this same concern too. New rules, these contracts themselves, they're getting much, much more expensive, especially with the Juan Soto contract. But with NHL, I think we could really see a positive turn. But is that going to be something that even for the entire country of Canada, they're going to need to end up making adjustments on their side if they really want to end up competing with a lot of these big teams that are here in the States?
Well, it's a good question. Certainly the tax rate in Canada is something that is a factor. I know that Gary Bettman, the commissioner, a lot of people that have been asked about this. Is this some sort of an advantage with state tax in Florida, places like Texas, Vegas? Is that an advantage for them? And they've really downplayed it a lot. Asked about maybe potential rule changes or changes, to try and make it a more balanced playing field. They have completely, dismissed it, that it is an advantage. And they have no desire at this point in time to do anything to change it. But I think it is a factor. I think it would be naive to say it's not a factor. I also don't know that it's completely a coincidence that, as you said, no Canadian team has won it since 1993, while we've had 4 Stanley Cup winners recently in the state of Florida. Now, granted, there were plenty of years where the Panthers and Lightning weren't very good and nobody cared about the state tax situation then. But now that they're winning and players see it's a great place to play, obviously you've got the weather, you've got all that, and you don't have to pay state income tax as well. I mean, Brad Marchand came out and said it. Is it a factor? Yes, it's a factor. Players do take that into consideration. Is it as big of a factor that there needs to be some sort of rule change or legislation to address it? The NHL at this point says no, but we'll see how much farther this thing goes before maybe they have to look into it.
Yeah, no, it's really going to be really interesting. And again, I was just like this. I'm like, we can only be so appreciative of there being no state tax in the state of Nevada, because I know at some point, I mean, the A's coming there. We've already had the Raiders, touchdown here. And then it's just like, at some point down. And especially with, political stances with even the legislatures and such, it's going to probably at some point change in the next few years, especially when you got new money involved. Things are starting to get, expensive, and somehow, some way, you got to be able to manage the monies right. So who knows? It might be really, really interesting down the road, but appreciate you for coming on by here, Eddie. Where can people find you for all of our audiences here to get them locked on the LA Kings all season long?
Yeah, well, if you are interested in the Los Angeles Kings at all, I do the podcast 5, sometimes 6 days a week, all year long. It's Locked On LA Kings, and please remember the LA part, or you might get an NBA team in Sacramento that talking to you about some hoops. But Locked On LA Kings. I've also been a part of a weekly NHL podcast that's now in its 19th year, believe it or not. We were one of the longest running hockey podcasts around. It's called the Puck Podcast. I've done it for 19 years with one of my best friends, just talking NHL every week. So if anybody wants to get a weekly NHL show, they can check out the Puck Podcast as well. And just to keep in your memory bank during the NHL season, I'm also co-host of a show called Locked On NHL Game Night. Wraps up the night in the NHL 7 days a week. So we'll be back once the NHL season starts up again in October.
Absolutely love it, man. I'm going to be locked into that, the up and coming season, man, because I just absolutely love hockey. I live here in Colorado now. We're almost going into the second year. So, of course, I got to deal with the Avs, but yet still, I got to rep up my hometown team in Vegas. And so I'm always going to be wanting to tuning into some hockey news and so much more up on it. So I will definitely be locked in on it. But appreciate you, Eddie. Have a great rest of your week. And by the way, happy 4th to you tomorrow. I know there's going to be lots of fireworks going to be blowing up here on a Friday, man. So be safe, enjoy, and we'll definitely see you soon here for the next up-and-coming season.
Yeah, well, if you like illegal fireworks, Los Angeles is the city for you because it is unbelievable the show that's puts on. The cities don't need to put on any shows. It's in everybody's street. You can just walk outside and see it all over the place. So, yes, we'll be enjoying the fireworks here in Los Angeles.
There you go, my friend. Enjoy it, man. Appreciate you for coming on by.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, now we got to bring in the man of the hour, of course, and my co-host Chase, who's finally on here with. We've had
didn't have to work tonight, man. They gave me the night off and everything because with me being a new person at work, and me in training still, they don't want me to get that overtime pay for the holiday. So they just gave me the holiday pay and said, "Here, have the night off."
Oh, well, at least there's some compensation right up from there.
Exactly.
Well, I do got to say, though, I mean, to going back to that trade, we know there's been an awful lot of, dude, I've been paying attention to everything. Okay. This is usually the dog day of our summer is when hockey, free agency, NBA free agency has just been fantastic. And then, of course, you still got the NFL free agency before the season starts. We're already close to the Hall of Fame game between the Lions and Chargers. And
it's insane. Like the end of this month and everything. And like the amount of people that are still available that are good.
Yes.
In the NFL is insane. Like absolutely insane.
So this was the thing. And I made this point before you came on is I just think the Pittsburgh Steelers, I just don't know if they've just become so insular with like defense, even after they just made that trade with Jalen Ramsey and then having to trade away Mika Fitzpatrick, which I was just like, it's typical. And they're taking the whole entirety of the contract. Like that just tells you that they're so invested up on defense. And then I'm looking over, I'm like, I don't trust the offensive line. I don't even know what the run game is literally going to look like that even with Jaylen Warren and the new rookie Caleb Johnson. But it's like, I don't know. Like I told you, I just think they're going to have a hard time putting up 25 plus points a game if they cannot figure out the chemistry and consistency of that offense.
Yeah, no, like I totally agree. And like, it's crazy because the Steelers want to spend all of this time, money, and effort on defense. Well, we have seen for the past, 4 or 5 years now, that the defense isn't going to matter when it comes to the end of the season because they are just going to be burnt out. They're going to be, not ready to go and everything. Because like everybody always hypes up the Steelers every year for the past like 5 years saying like, this is a strong team. This is a playoff team, blah, 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 blah. And then like they're, they've got 1 loss or 2 losses by the time week 9 or 10 comes. And then they go on a streak where they lose like 4 or 5 straight at the end of the season because their defense is burnt out. Their offense can't score anything. And they're just looking mediocre. And, they got 2 offensive pieces that are going to make an impact in Caleb Johnson and DK Metcalf. But then you trade away your number 2 option in George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys. You get an aging quarterback in Aaron Rodgers who had
TJ Watt
the
wants $40 million a year.
Yeah, who arguably has Aaron Rodgers had arguably the worst season of his career last year and everything. And now you're sitting here saying like he's going to be your savior. It's just like, dude, you've got him, you've got Mason Rudolph, and you've got Will Howard.
Yeah, and look, as for someone, that watches Ohio State, I mean, look, I've said this before. I have nothing against Will Howard. I don't. I mean, watching him from Kansas State and then going into Ohio State, and it's like we said before, is that if Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator for Ohio State, you would have seen more quarterback development because that's just who Bill O'Brien is. He's very much that quarterback developer. Nothing against Chip Kelly, but Chip was more used to the hefty run game. But, it's like with Pittsburgh, they're trying to figure out the next Big Ben, and it's never going to exist. That's why it's just like you cannot afford to be mediocre at quarterback. Once again, for the second straight year, you lucked out of getting Russell Wilson for that cheap year. And then even when you had Justin Fields, as much as I like the kid, and he got better, but he still couldn't stretch the field for you.
He also did not have the weapons to work with either. So,
yeah, I mean, outside of George Pickens, and you got Calvin Austin, you had Roman Wilson, who was sidelined, and now he's back this upcoming season. I don't know. I just don't think that it's willing to compete with even with an offensive plethora like Baltimore and Cincinnati. And even if you look at Cleveland with their hefty run game, with the dual running backs now that they have that are young, they're hungry. And then you even got, who knows what the quarterback situation, but I still have.
Now you got Taj Brooks and Chase Brown for Cincy and everything. Yeah. Derrick Henry and Hill and everything in the backfield.
Yeah.
And now you've got Caleb Johnson, a young guy, and then Jalen Warren, the veteran for the Steelers. Like, rely more on the run game because that's what it's going to be.
I'd say rely on the offense because if there's anything that we learned, right? Because how many people have sold their stock on Buffalo last year? Buffalo got younger on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Tampa got younger on defense.
Yep.
The Chiefs got younger up on defense, and even Philadelphia got young on defense. And what did all of them translate? Win games, make the playoffs, and then, of course, one team won the Super Bowl, the Eagles. So it's like, what is Pittsburgh really doing? Like this whole steel curtain defensive, battle cry. They're pumping their chest up. Like, come on.
And now, like you said, they're going to have $41 million invested into TJ Watt. They're going to
should have traded away, and you could have gotten so many assets. But this is why I said
but he hasn't signed yet. Like the thing is, they're saying like he's projected to sign by the beginning of the season. But I also feel like this is why they got Derek Harmon to take over for Cam Ward. Yep. This is why they got Jack Sawyer to take over for TJ Watt.
Yep.
And I do feel like, if they can't get a deal done by the start of the season, before the first preseason game or the second preseason game, I feel like TJ Watt would be traded.
But this is the thing though, Chase, is that we've always had this saying, strike when the iron's hot. If they would have just struck on that trade, like I told you, because this was on record, I specifically said, if you traded TJ Watt and you got first round picks, you could have gotten Abdul Carter if you were up there and up into the tops. Because honestly, you would have had 4 years of not paying him. And then you would have gotten your whole entire offensive plethora of offensive line, run game, maybe a quarterback or a wide receiver if you really wanted to. But yet they didn't because they're so loyal with TJ Watt. This whole loyalty thing has been so out the door. Nobody cares about that. People care
trade
about
him and get the assets to go get a QB. I mean, you are going if Tomlin has shown anything in the past, it has been that he is very consistent with being, a middle of the tier to, late round of the first round because
every year
it's anywhere from 15 to 23.
Listen,
you think that you're going to get a quarterback, especially a top tier quarterback?
Yes.
In the 23 range? Probably not.
Now listen, that part of the draft is only better if you have the quarterback, if you have the offensive line, and if you actually have a young defense. Take, for instance, i.e. the Chargers. The Chargers are in great shape because
They've already paid Justin Herbert. They got better up on their offensive line because they needed to protect him to unleash his potential. And then at the same time, look at that defense turn from worst to first. Like that, and all they got was Amari Hampton. They've got
and Trey Harris.
Yeah. They got a dual running back set that's exactly what Jim Harbaugh loves.
Who is their other running back?
Najee Harris.
Oh, gosh, that's right.
That's what I'm saying. Look at that dual backfield. Does that not just scream fantasy touchdowns there for you?
And a guy that's available that is still a veteran and could be a solid, capable weapon for, Justin Herbert, Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen are both still available.
Yeah. So, but that's where a lot of that could be so simplified. I mean, hell, even the Rams up at 26, they've already got Stafford. And they've already gotten Devontae Adams. You give him at least that over-the-top receiver to help out. And even if you already have Puka Nacua, but your defense got younger. And then at the same time, Kyron Williams. I mean, hopefully we'll see something out of Blake Corum. But you learn from these teams. I mean, Joe Ortiz, Les Snead, Brett Veach, all these teams, they figured it out. It's not rocket science for most of them.
It's really not.
But this is the thing, though. The only team you can be impressed with is the Chicago Bears. Seriously. Because how long have the Bears been stuck on defense until Ben Johnson got there and literally harped upon, I need a better offensive line. I need to have an offensive plethora of weapons to help out with Caleb Williams, and then I can develop him to where he's not holding the ball on for too long.
Yep.
That's one thing I've been impressed with. When do you ever hear me say that I've been more impressed with Chicago than I have been with Pittsburgh? What the hell?
Yeah, I know. It's absolutely insane to think about just because, you sit here and you look at the history of Pittsburgh.
Think a small sample size. That's all I need is a small sample size of Steeler fans are actually coming to my side. They're actually starting to listen to me.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, though, if the Steelers were very smart and if their front office on Omar Khan was as smart as what people say he is, here's what you do. TJ Watt is your franchise cornerstone player.
Yes.
He is going to be a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
But you are picking in the middle of the pack every single year in the draft, and you have no chance to get that top-tier QB.
Yes.
What do? You trade TJ Watt to a potential top 3 team in the league.
That's
bottom 3 team in the league.
Honestly, I think he would have been
trade him to the Saints or something and get the number 1 pick. That way you can get a QB.
I would trade him to the Patriots because what do we know that Mike Vrabel loves more than anything? He likes a solid pass rusher. Mm-hmm. And you could give him that. Hell, you could even give the Titans a pass rusher. Because, you could pair him with Jeffrey Simmons. I mean,
they got the Jets. The Jets could use a solid pass rusher.
Use it too. Because here's the thing: they're not going to be doing the same similarity as what happened with Hassan Reddick. They could honestly be better than that with TJ Watt. Mm-hmm. So you could have honestly
pairing him with Aaron Glenn. Ooh, that would be dangerous.
Yeah, the whole defensive front, even when you got Jermaine Johnson on the other side. I'm telling you, man, that the whole entire defensive front for the Jets would be unbelievable.
Dude, it would be absolutely insane because then you have Quentin Williams, you'd have Quincy Williams, who is on there as well. You'd have Jermaine Johnson. You'd have there's one other defensive tackle that I'm kind of forgetting with them. And then you'd have TJ Watt. Yeah, that secondary would be great too.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, if only if that light bulb clicked in their head, it would have been the only thing that would have at least saved the Steeler franchise. But yeah, unbelievable. Good stuff, man. Any plans for the 4th? Because I know I got the day off, and I know I'm going to be celebrating with some fireworks and all the rest of it. But
I mean, I work tomorrow night. I mean, now that they got me on a 3rd shift schedule, I am going to be currently working all the time. I go into work. I leave my apartment probably at 8:30, get to work by 9:30 and everything, clock in and get going. I still am waiting to find out when I'm going to get hired in at the sheriff's office and everything here in Columbus, and then everything will change going from there. So it's gonna be a fun time and everything, man.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more of a calming day tomorrow. Like, I mean, we're going to be hanging out with some friends and family, and because we know that dog really doesn't usually do well up on fireworks. It usually always is the case with some of them, but
My dog's okay with fireworks. She's very calm and everything.
Yeah.
She finds it soothing.
there you go.
No, dude, I like when I heard that Jalen Ramsey news, and I was just like, seriously, dude, like, are you kidding me? Like, first Jair Alexander, then Jalen Ramsey, but the fact that they got Minka out of Pittsburgh, I was happy about that.
Yeah, right. I mean, who would have known he would have gone back to Miami? Isn't that
I mean, Miami shouldn't have gotten rid of him in the first place, but they did not think that he was going to amount to anything, but you were playing him out of position. You were playing him at corner rather than safety, and I'm like, really?
Yeah. And it was like he's not a corner. He's more of that borderline slot safety. Like, he's really that kind. So
yeah. And then he's been like a 3-time All-Pro at the safety position. I'm like, dude, like, this is exactly why Miami's mediocre. And now they've been trying to get a tight end to replace Jonnu Smith.
Yeah, now they got Darren Waller.
Like, and they've been trying to contact the Browns to try to trade for David Njoku.
Yeah, that wasn't even going to happen.
No.
But it's funny because isn't it – when I look at Miami's side, a quick note, does it just scream that there's going to be firings this end of the season?
Yeah.
It sounds to me this is just their way of Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel to be out the door.
I think that this is the final season with them, and if a healthy Tua and a healthy offense with a Mike McDaniels-led offense and everything, if they don't make it to the playoffs and win a playoff game, they're out of there. Even if they make the playoffs and they don't win, I still think they're out of there.
This is the thing. You're dealing with the New England that's going to smash you in the mouth. You got the Jets, who probably are not even going to be playing nice. And then you got the Buffalo. Like, this is not going to be good for Miami. That's
I can make a hot take saying that I could see Miami being in 4th place in that division, but I still think it might be the Jets.
To be truthfully honest, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I
think the Patriots are going to be in 2nd place in that division. They spent their entire $175 million. They spent their entire $175 million on defense in all the.
The reason of it is because we know Mike Vrabel is a defensive guy, but
and then spent their picks on offense, including a future offensive tackle.
Yes, and so you want to give protection for your future quarterback, and then at the same time, but it's like I said, it's all coming to fruition that New England will make the playoffs before Miami and Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Because they'll fight for that last wild card spot. It's going to come down to the trenches. That's exactly what we're going to see this upcoming season. It's going to be nothing but ground and pound run game, and it's going to come down to the last man standing. Well,
it's absolutely insane to sit here and think about, and just looking at everything and how it's going to play out. It's very interesting. Before we go, like, here's a few free agents that are still available. You got Amari Cooper, Asante Samuel Jr., Justin Simmons, Kaiser White, Brandon Sheriff, Keenan Allen, Julian Blackmon, Gabe Davis, and Mike Hilton are the ones that are all still available. Like, that's a lot of talent still on the board.
But I think these guys, eventually will be signed in by the time that we start off with preseason, because
probably by the regular season,
because by the time you're going to be going through the prunings, you're going to be going through those cuts that eventually will shape your 53-man roster. And even for guys that don't end up making it, that's when you can go out and then you could say, hey, we might actually have a fill-in for this position. So these guys are probably going to be potentially fill-ins for the rest of the season, because at that point you've already made the cuts, you've already set your roster. And all you're looking for now is just that little bit of extra that can really help out to really boost up the team. And it's not a bad idea. All right. Well, this week's been great, and we've had great guests up on. Shout out to Matt Perkins of Bleav in Badgers, talking to us about Wisconsin football. And then at the same time, shout out to Eddie Garcia, who was live up in Los Angeles during the NHL draft and talking about the LA Kings as well. Appreciate those guys for being here. Next week, though, we got some pretty good guests coming up on here, because we got one guest. We got a couple guests that's both going to be college, because we got to really get nitty-gritty on the Penn State Nittany line. We got a guest coming up from there. Zach Sicko is going to be joining us here. And also, a guest that's going to be talking about what the vibes are going to be like in Chapel Hill when Chapel Hill starts his first season in college football. So, not all of that here coming up next week. It's going to be a fun one for Jace and myself. Happy 4th of July to all of you tomorrow. Be safe. Make smarter decisions and choices there, but also enjoy the great food as we celebrate our nation's holiday for our freedom and for also our everyday independence for what makes this country a great country all around the world. Appreciate everybody for joining on by. Enjoy it, and we will see you guys next week here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, everyone.